I'm going to go over classifications and measurement scales and hopefully give you a little bit more of an in-depth understanding of how to choose classifications and how to choose measurement scales. The key is whenever you're asked for classifications, you should be providing me two classifications. So you have to choose between either qualitative or quantitative, and then the second, you have to choose between discrete or continuous. So I'll kind of give you some basic ideas of what these classifications entail. So with qualitative, think about quality. So it's kind of the key word. So it's basically a subjective idea about something. So as far as a variable that would be qualitative would be, whether this video was helpful or not helpful. That's just a quality difference. You can't actually subtract not helpful from helpful and find a difference. There's no numerical value. It's just a subjective quality difference. Whereas quantitative, just think of the word quantity. Okay? So when we think quantity, there's numbers. So if I say, rate how helpful this video is, between 1 and 5, being 1 meaning it's not helpful at all, 5 being extremely helpful. Well, if you give me a score of 4 and then someone else gives me a score of 2, I can actually say, oh, there was a difference of 2 points between the rating system. So that's actual numbers where you can have a quantity difference. So with this, I always think of numbers. Okay? And this, I think of, just think ideas, maybe. That's a good way of thinking. Or feelings, things like that. So there's no actually numbers. It's ideas or categories or names, those types of things. Then you'd have to decide between discrete or continuous. Now this is all based upon a couple of things. For discrete, you can have numbers, but maybe the numbers have no decimals. So again, if I asked you how helpful was this video, circle a number 1 through 5, and you circle 2, that means that they're discrete numbers. There is no possibility for 1.75 or 1.33. They're whole numbers. So in this case, it's just either whole numbers or if you think about like categories. So if I said, was this video helpful or not helpful? That's categories, which kind of correlates with ideas, right? So these are things like whole numbers or categories with nothing in between. There's no numbers in between. Whereas continuous classification, these are numbers with an infinite amount of possibilities. So numbers that can have decimals. So that's the key. So it could be fractions or decimals. So if we're talking about exam percentages, you could have anything from 0 to 100%, but you could have any possible percentage in between there. You could have, your depending upon how much you get right, you could have a 75.5%. So there can be a decimal. So, and this is a way to distinguish between discrete or continuous. Whole numbers categories, it's discrete. Continuous variables have an infinite amount of possible numbers in between each major number. So this is really the way to kind of distinguish between classifications. So we'll go a little bit further into this. Look more. Sorry about that. Some example classifications of variables. So I have 4 different ones here, and so 4 different examples. So if I asked you what your preference of a pet is, dog or cat, well, if we think about either qualitative or quantitative, the type of pet is just a quality difference. You can't put a number to it. It's either a dog or a cat. Either, the pet has these features, or the pet has these features. So this would be a qualitative. And then we have to choose between discrete or continuous. So since how it's just categories, dog or cat, there's no numerical values attached to it, no possibility for decimals or fractions, we're going to have discrete. So we would choose qualitative and discrete for our classifications. Oops, not discrete-er, but just discrete. Then if for the next variable, we have level of pain, and it's 1 through 5. 1 being very little pain, 5 being extreme pain. So these aren't qualitative because there are actually values. If you say your level of pain is 5, that's 4 points higher than if you said 1. So there is a value difference, a quantity difference. So we would choose quantitative. Then if we look at discrete or continuous, this is one of those ones where technically it could be continuous data. If I said, I'll give you an example. I've gone to the chiropractor, and the chiropractor often says this to me: what is your level of pain today? And he laughs because I always say, well, it's like a 3.555. And he laughs and he goes, oh, that's how I know you are a statistician, is because you can't just give me a normal number like all the other patients. Like most patients just give a whole number. So he just rounds everything to a whole number. So typically it is a whole number. So I would say a standard, if you're saying, a scale of 1 to 5, those are whole numbers. So that's kind of the automatic. But it doesn't mean that you can't give a decimal. It's just more than likely it's going to be rounded to a whole number. So in this case, I'm going to say discrete, quantitative and discrete, because these are whole numbers. Now again, number of students. Number of students, you could have 0 students, you could have 5 students. So there's a quantity difference. You can subtract one from the other. So if somebody says, how many students did you have over the summer? I could say 0. If I didn't teach any classes over the summer, I'd say, 0 students. So that's a quantity. So quantitative. Oops. If I could write, tative. And again, you can't have half of a student or 0.25 of a student. So this would be discrete instead of continuous, because there are only whole numbers involved. So these are the kinds of answers you would be giving me, and what the rationale for why you would give them. Then we have size of shirt, small, medium, or large. So yes, large is larger than medium or small, but there isn't a quantity difference. So there isn't an exact, like you can't subtract small from large. Now, if it was measured in inches, yes, you could, but these are just categories. So in this case, we're looking at qualitative and again, these are categories, discrete. Sorry, I'm running out of room. So just because they're categories and there's no numbers involved. So here's some ideas of how we kind of work through figuring out what classifications these are. So let's look at, I'll go back, at scales of measurement, because classifications are different than scales of measurement. So when you're asked, describe the classifications and scales of measurement, you should be giving me 2 classifications and 1 scale of measurement for each variable. So scales of measurement, there's 4 different kind. You have nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. So with nominal, think of names or categories. So, dog versus cat. That's just a category or a name of a type of pet. There's no numbers attached to these. Ordinal. Think of order or ranking. So there is maybe a subjective value difference, like when I said, okay, how helpful was this video? Not helpful or very helpful. There's this subjective idea about there is a difference between how valuable this video is, but that I can't subtract one from the other per se. So it's more of a ranking type of variable. And then interval. Interval, we're dealing with numbers. The key here is you either have a scale or a rating system with no zero, or 0 is merely a placeholder. So we say arbitrary, meaning it doesn't mean there's an absence. So if you get a 0% on exam 1, that's not arbitrary. That's a real 0. 0 is meaningful, absolutely meaningful. But when we talk about IQ scores, there is no possibility of getting a 0. We have 0 on the scoring system, but it's merely a placeholder. No one can potentially score 0. It's merely a placeholder that you can't actually score 0. Now the difference is and there is no actual 0 in the rating system. The 0 is merely just for showing data and histograms and things like that. Now this is where it gets tricky, because some people will go, well, wait a minute, what about like how much the weight of a person, like someone's weight? They're like, well, but they can't have a 0 body weight. But there is an actual 0 in the measurement system, and that's the key. So with IQ scores, if we're talking about the Stanford-Binet, there is no 0 in the measurement system. Whereas with weight, the scale starts at 0. So that's the thing. So if there is no 0, or if 0 is just a placeholder and doesn't mean there's an absence, then you have interval data. Now with ratio, there is a 0, and 0 is meaningful. So that means that there is an absence. So that's where, like, an exam score of 0 means you didn't earn any points. You didn't do the work, or you didn't understand any of it. So that is a meaningful measurement. So let's talk about how we reach these. So with scales of measurement, if we look at preference of pet, dog or cat, those are just categories. Like I said, so that's nominal. So in this case, I would say nominal. So we knew before with the classifications, we'd said, oh, this was qualitative and discrete. Now with scales of measurement, it's nominal because they're just categories. Level of pain, 1 to 5. Ooh, this is where it gets interesting. So level of pain starts 1. There's no 0, right? And so we know that it's not nominal because it's not categories. We're talking about having a range of possibilities. It's not really a ranking, or it's not ordinal, because we can actually subtract 1 from 5 and say, oh, there's a difference of 4 between the pain level, you know. So, and we know it's not ratio because we don't have a 0. So this is interval data because it's a 1. There is no 0. So, and then we have our scale of measurement, which is interval. If you recall, our classifications were quantitative and discrete because they were whole numbers for discrete, and quantitative because we could subtract 1 from 5. And then number of students. Remember, I said I could have 0 students or I could have 500 students, but I can't have, half a student. But 0 is a real number. It means I don't have any students. So in that case, we have ratio data. And remember, the classifications were quantitative and discrete. Size of shirt, small, medium, large. That's just a ranking, right? Subjectively, large is bigger than small. But if you think about it, you go to any store, and like at some stores I'll wear a large shirt, but at other stores I'll just wear a medium shirt. So it really depends. There's not an exact, precise measurement in between. It's just a subjective difference. So in that case, we're looking at ordinal because it is just a ranking. So hopefully this video helps you to kind of work through what classifications and measurement scales are and how to determine them. And please don't hesitate to email me with questions or come see me during my office hours during my office hours on Cranium Cafe, if I'm still using Cranium Cafe by the time you watch this video. Thank you, and you have a good day.